This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh, that was loud. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Caregiver Forum, as hosted in collaboration with the University Health Network Memory Clinic. My name is Casey Okamura. I'm one of the public education coordinators at the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto. And before we begin, I would just like to get a sense of who is here with us. So I'm going to be launching a poll. And if you don't mind just sharing answering the question, I am here because. I will ask that if it is other, if you just type in the chat to indicate who you are. You don't need to give any private information, but just a sense of getting an idea of who is in the space with us today. And I'm going to give people just a minute to do so as people are joining. So it looks like, let me just share the results real quick so that people can see. It looks like we have a little bit higher mix of people living, working in healthcare, a couple people that are supporting someone living with dementia. But welcome everyone to today's session. I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So today's session is being recorded. It will be placed on the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto's YouTube channel, as well as UHN's Memory Clinic website, where you'll be able to access the recordings of previous virtual caregiver forums as well. For this reason, I ask that you refrain from sharing any private information in the chat. I also ask that you do stay on mute for the entirety of the presentation. This way, everyone is able to hear clearly. However, feel free to use the chat box to pose any questions that you have for our presenter, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can after the presentation. Our speaker has also provided copies of the slides that will be shared to everyone that has registered after the webinar. So today's topic is on driving and dementia, and I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Nagley. Dr. Gary Nagley is a professor in the Department of Medicine and the Institute of Health Policy, Management, and Evaluation at the University of Toronto. He is Vice President of Medical Services and Chief of Staff and Chief of the Department of Medicine at Baycrest Health Sciences. He is also a scientist at Baycrest Rotman Research Institute. His current major research focus is on driving issues in older adults. Please join me in welcoming our speaker today.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, Casey. And can you just confirm that you're able to see my slides in slide presentation mode?
Yes, I can see them.
Terrific. I'm delighted to be here today, and I thank all of you who are joining the presentation. Unfortunately, Dr. Mark Rappaport, who's a geriatric psychiatrist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center and at the University of Toronto, is unable to join us because of an unexpected issue. So I will be solely presenting today. And before I begin, I'd just like to recognize our co-investigators across the country who participated in various ways. Our research associates, including our current research associate, Elaine Stasiulis, our research assistants that have worked with us, and our research trainees over the years. They say it takes a village, and I think that's definitely the case. In terms of acknowledgements with respect to funding, we'd like to thank the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging, that's supported by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and Partners, the Centre for Aging and Brain Health Innovation at Baycrest, the Ontario Ministry of Health Academic Health Sciences Centres, Alternate Funding Plan Innovation Fund, the CRHR Institute of Aging Betty Havens Prize for Knowledge Mobilization in Aging, and the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and Brain Canada Foundation. With respect to thanks, we certainly would like to acknowledge and thank people with lived experience, the Alzheimer's Society of Manitoba, Niagara Region, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Southwestern Partners, and Toronto. I can't say enough about the Alzheimer's Society in terms of their collaboration and support for this work. In terms of an overview, I'll begin with a bit of a background on driving and dementia. I will then present on the development of the Driving and Dementia Roadmap that I will refer to as the DDR for the remainder of this presentation. I'll provide you a tour of the DDR, talk to you about our dissemination strategy and our next steps with respect to the DDR. So, driving cessation is a complex, challenging, emotion-laden process for people living with dementia, for their family, friend carers, and for healthcare providers. There's two elements to it. One is making the decision about stopping to drive. The other is transitioning from non-driving. And of course, this requires a balance of personal and public safety issues with health and psychosocial consequences to stopping driving, and I'll speak a bit about this. I'm beginning with a slide from the Canadian Outcome Study in Dementia that was led by Dr. Herman, who was at Sunnybrook at that time, looking at people with mild to moderate dementia. And this was a study that followed people over time. And they identified that at the beginning of the study at baseline, 28% of the participants were still driving. And of interest, 2 years later, about half of those who were driving at baseline were still driving. And 3 years later, about a quarter were still driving. And these results are consistent with findings in numerous jurisdictions, including in the United States and in Europe, that shows that people who are diagnosed with dementia often do continue to drive and may do so for many years. This slide is somewhat dated that tried to estimate the number of drivers in Ontario with dementia. And in fact, Dr. Rappaport and myself are working with the Ontario Ministry of Transportation to try to update these estimates. But of interest, if you look over time, you could see that with the increasing number of people with dementia, and this is forecast to increase quite significantly over the upcoming years, that there's been almost essentially an exponential increase in drivers with dementia, or at least the estimates of drivers with dementia. And currently, we're roughly at 100,000 drivers with dementia in Ontario. So why is this important that people with dementia often continue to drive and may do so for many years? Is this slide is based on a summary of several slides that have synthesized the results from many studies. And it's very consistently been shown that people with dementia compared to those with normal cognition have more problems with road rules, lane maintenance, lane changing, turning, especially left-hand turns across traffic, maintaining road speed, driving either too fast or too slowly, stopping appropriately and avoiding collisions. In addition, it's been demonstrated that they exhibit less attention and slower decision-making when driving. And not surprisingly, driving performance decreases with increasing dementia severity. 6 of 10 studies have found that drivers with dementia crashed more often than controls, anywhere from 2 to 10 times. I suspect that negative studies may well have been related more to study methods than the fact that there is not an increased crash risk. So people with dementia often continue to drive, often for a long time, and their driving performance tends to decline, and they appear to have an increased crash risk. On the other side of the equation, when people stop driving, there are a number of health and psychosocial outcomes that have been consistently demonstrated, including less social engagement and out-of-home activity, more depressive symptoms, poorer general health, poorer functional status, greater cognitive decline, greater long-term care placement, and greater risk of mortality. The work that we've done, largely based on interviews, has strongly demonstrated the emotional impact of having to stop driving. These are the emotional impacts we found for people with dementia. So it can impact their sense of identity and self-worth. Driving is not simply getting from point A to point B. So driving is connected to sense of freedom, independence, and control, to roles that people have in their lives, taking care of spouse, children, grandchildren, aging parents. It's connected to work and livelihood, and it's connected to enjoyment. The emotions that having to give up driving have been associated with are loss, sadness, grief, fear and anxiety, depression, frustration, guilt, and anger that can be directed at family members and healthcare providers. We've also noted in our work that there are a lot of emotional impacts for family, friend, carers as well. This can include things like loss, sadness, and grief, fear and anxiety, frustration, anger, guilt, feelings of being discouraged and powerless, and at times being overwhelmed. Our studies have identified several challenges associated with driving cessation. We have noted a lack of understanding by people living with dementia and sometimes caregivers about the relationship between dementia and driving. We've clearly identified that no one likes to talk about driving cessation issues. This includes people living with dementia, family, caregivers, and healthcare providers. And this is very problematic because the consequence is often this issue is not raised until later stages of the disease process, when the person living with dementia is no longer able to participate in a meaningful way in the decision to stop driving, as well as in decision making about how to maintain their quality of life after driving. There's a lack of training and knowledge among healthcare providers about assessing fitness to drive and supporting quality of life post-driving cessation. There are few established evidence-based interventions in this area, and resources can be difficult to access and their credibility hard to determine. So as a result of these early findings in our work, we were determined to develop a resource to support people with dementia, family, friend carers, and health providers in the decision-making and transitioning to non-driving. We undertook a number of reviews of the literature in various areas related to either driving cessation or major life transitions. We published several of these. We did a synthesis or brought together the existing qualitative studies on key informant subjective experiences of driving cessation and dementia. We carried out our own qualitative studies. We did a study exploring stakeholder perspectives of driving cessation and dementia that included interviews of focus groups with healthcare providers, organizational representatives, family caregivers, and people living with dementia. We also examined factors relevant to effective implementation of a driving resource that was done in conjunction with Alzheimer's Society staff in 4 separate provinces. And our key findings included there is a perceived lack of education and resources for advanced planning and decision-making about driving cessation and the transition to non-driving. Facilitating discussions about driving cessation are critical for early planning and promoting shared decision-making. And as I pointed out earlier, Unfortunately, often no one wants to speak about the issue of driving, so this does not occur to allow people living with dementia to participate actively in the decisions around this. Clearly, time and time again, the emotional effects of driving cessation have come up, and we feel that the emotional effects are as important as attending to the practical aspects, such as transportation planning. This is a quote from a family carer. The trauma of losing her vehicle, speaking about their mother, the use of her vehicle was as traumatic as losing my dad. It was like losing a spouse. Family and friend carers need support in their role of maintaining purpose, roles, and social participation of people with dementia who have to give up driving. So based on this work that I've just referenced, we developed a driving and dementia intervention framework, and we purposefully separated the practical components from the emotion-focused components because of recognizing the emphasis that kept coming up on the emotional issues. Practical components, including things like information and awareness about driving and dementia, communication, and this is communication with people with dementia, with family members, with friends, with healthcare providers, mobility and community access issues. The emotion-focused components relate to relationships and role transitions, issues of crisis and conflict, issues of loss and grief, and finally, issues related to identity and meaning. So we then undertook to identify and assess all publicly available resources and tools that address driving cessation. And then each of these were assessed based on evidence-based relevance and usability in terms of whether we felt it should be included in this resource that we were developing. We then curated these tools and resources to align with the driving and dementia intervention framework. We assembled an advisory group which included 4 people living with dementia and 4 family carers that were recruited from the Murray Alzheimer's Research and Education Program. And they have been involved throughout this work, providing ongoing feedback on the content of the roadmap, as well as design features. We also included geriatric psychiatrist, occupational therapist, and a manager from Driving Authority to again provide input on the healthcare professional portal, of course, in addition to the health providers that are part of our research team. There are various other contributors that have been extremely important. We engaged a plain language writer that had experience developing educational content for people living with dementia. I never was aware of such expertise, and I can't stress how important this has been throughout in developing the materials for people living with dementia, as well as for caregivers. We engaged with web developers and graphic designers as well. And once we got to a near final product, we undertook an implementation evaluation to explore the acceptability, adaptability, and preliminary benefits and limitations to the driving and dementia roadmap. To do this, we engaged 6 Alzheimer's Society organizations in 4 provinces, and it involved 19 staff from the Alzheimer's Society, 8 current and former drivers with dementia, and 13 family friend carers. And these are the preliminary findings from the implementation evaluation. They reported high levels of acceptability, finding the DDR to be very useful, enlightening, and necessary. They felt that it brought deeper awareness and understanding about driving cessation, which impacted participants' approach, for example, being more diligent about observing warning signs. And these are some quotes from a family caregiver referring to the DDR as helping me to monitor the person with dementia more. I'm going to make sure that every few months I either go in the car with her or follow her and talk to her about it on a regular basis. And a person with dementia noted, it made me realize there's an end to driving somewhere in the future. Actually, I hadn't even thought of it. Somewhere along the line, I know I've got to stop. Emotion-specific content provided insight about grief and loss, enabling family members to attend to the emotional ramifications and initiate conversations with empathy and patience. Strategies to remain mobile after driving cessation brought relief and hope. And here's a quote from a family carer. The DDR gave me a little bit of hope that together as a team with my siblings, we can figure out a plan. So I'm now going to give you a brief tour through screenshots of the Driving and Dementia Roadmap. I've identified the link here, www.drivinganddementia.ca. So when you click on the link, this is the homepage that you'll be brought to. And I point out that we have 3 separate portals on the far left for people living with dementia, either still driving or no longer driving. In the middle, for family and friend carers for a person with dementia who's either still driving or no longer driving. And on the far right, for healthcare providers. So if this is a person living with dementia who's still driving, if they click on that, they will be brought to this page. And these are tiles that represent areas that they can choose to try to get more information about. Understanding how dementia can affect my driving, recognizing when it becomes unsafe to drive, getting help deciding to stop driving, getting around without driving, dealing with my emotions, learning about licensing, reporting, and transportation options, learning about a printable version of the Driving Dementia Roadmap, and learning about potential research studies that I can participate in. So if they click on recognizing when it becomes unsafe to drive, this is what they would find. And just to give you a sense, so we've tried to keep the amount of information fairly brief to not overwhelm the person living with dementia. So it says, as soon as you have dementia diagnosis, it's important to keep checking whether your driving is safe. If you notice changes in your driving, you should start thinking about whether you're still able to drive safely. It may become more difficult to recognize that you are no longer able to drive safely. They can then click on assessing your driving and learn more about some of the red flags. They can click on learning how others assess your driving. And here's access to a video. It says, see this daughter and mother discuss the possibility of the mother having a driving assessment, about other ways to get around. If they clicked on the tile on getting help deciding to stop driving, it recognizing deciding to stop driving can be a difficult decision. Make sure to get support. And then there's more information on talking to someone you trust, on talking to your doctor. And here's try these worksheets. So for help deciding when is the right time to give up driving, click on the titles below. So there's a dementia driving decision aid, and you could see that on the right-hand part of the screen. This was developed by the University of Wollongong, Australia, and we collaborated with them to develop a Canadian-specific version, which is available in the DDR. They could also link to warning signs for drivers with dementia, click on agreement with my family about driving, which is an actual written agreement that allows them to identify a family member or friend who they would trust to make a decision about their driving should they no longer be able to do so. And then you see below that getting there using alternative transportation, driving activities, where, when, and why. So if this is a person living with dementia and they're no longer driving, if they click on that, they then get to these choices for more information, understanding why it was necessary to stop driving, getting around without driving, and then the other areas are similar to those who are still driving. So here, if they clicked on getting around without driving, it says think about all the places you go to and then see if any of these options would work for getting there, and lists a number of different things that they can and should consider. Consider changing some of your routines with the support of someone you trust, such as a family member, friend, or caregiver. So for example, getting your payments to be automatically paid and using various delivery services for groceries, pharmacy, and shopping. It then gives, throughout the Driving Dementia Roadmap, we include quotes by people living with dementia and carers. So here's a quote from a person with dementia who says, people are there to help, and they like to help. It makes them feel good to help. If you rely on people a little more, it can actually be a good thing. It can bring you closer together. And we have videos that can speak to this issue, and then worksheets. And on the right is one of the worksheets, getting there using alternative transportation. So how do you develop an alternative transportation plan? And this can help give some structure to that process. We generally will give the recommendation that assigning a single family member, like a spouse or child, to meet all your transportation needs is more a recipe for burnout for the caregiver than it is a successful transportation plan. So we strongly encourage that they identify a number of different alternative sources of transportation for the different activities they do. In addition, besides limiting burnout to a caregiver, having different sources of transportation provides opportunities for the person living with dementia to socialize with different people, and this can be helpful to them as well. If you're a family, friend, carer, and the person that you're caring for is still driving, these are the different sources of information and support that you can find, understanding the importance of giving up driving, recognizing when it becomes unsafe to drive, having conversations about giving up driving, transitioning and planning ahead, dealing with emotions, managing when the person with dementia won't stop driving, learning about licensing, reporting, and transportation options, learning about printable versions of the Driving Dementia Roadmap that you may want to share with a person living with dementia who may not be tech savvy or prefers to look at things in print, and again, research studies that they may participate in. So if they clicked on having conversations about giving up driving, it states when starting a conversation about driving risk with a person with dementia, it is important to show compassion and empathy. Thinking about how it would feel to no longer be able to drive. Share your thoughts with the person with dementia while encouraging them to also talk about what a loss of driving means to them. There's some information about having ongoing discussions about driving risk, and then worksheets. On the far right is an example of a worksheet of a conversation planner. How can I have a good conversation about not driving? And this is a great resource. It talks about who might be the best person, when might be the best time to do this, and what you want the conversation to include. Just below that, not going it alone, who can offer support. There's another worksheet about that. And then below that, you can click on videos, and these are some excellent videos. I think one from Alzheimer's Association in the States, one from Australia, that give great examples of conversations that can help give you ideas about how to engage in such difficult conversations. If you clicked on the tile about managing when the person with dementia won't stop driving. It suggests that there are a number of things that you can do if the person with dementia refuses to stop driving, or if they keep forgetting that they're unfit to drive, a suggestion of ideas, and then again, some videos that this one is by Teepa Snow, I believe is an occupational therapist who has a series of videos that can be really helpful when people are struggling with the person with dementia not wanting to give up their driving. There's also a separate page for family caregivers for people with dementia who are no longer driving. It has information about understanding why it was necessary to give up driving, having conversations to address to no longer driving, and then similar tiles to the one for people with dementia who are still driving, sorry. And so here's an example. If they clicked on dealing with emotions. So the loss of driving is a major life event that affects both the person with dementia and you. Even after the person with dementia has made the transition to non-driving, you may both continue to experience a wide range of emotions. However, emotions can be unpredictable and everyone is different. Though some people with dementia have very strong negative feelings about having to give up driving, others are accepting or actually relieved because driving became very anxious, anxiety-provoking for them. Likewise, you may find yourself having both negative and positive feelings about it. So then there's information and resources about recognizing that driving fulfills very emotional needs, cope with emotional impact on me, manage the emotional impact on the person with dementia, and then worksheets. This one is on not going it alone, who can offer support, and it gives you some guidance about helping to create a network to help support you and the person with dementia to deal with giving up driving. This is just to show you the print versions of the Driving with Dementia roadmap. We recognize that certain people in certain particular smaller communities may have either poor Wi-Fi or not have access to the internet. There also may be people who are not tech savvy or choose not to engage much with technology that would prefer to have print versions. So we made sure to make those available. And finally, in terms of the healthcare professional, if you click on being a healthcare professional, these are your options for more information and resources: understanding my role, understanding dementia and driving risk, recognizing challenges, assessing fitness to drive, having discussions and managing emotions, providing support after driving cessation, learning about reporting, licensing, and transportation options, the driving and dementia roadmap handout, which I'll show you that they can hand out to people living with dementia and caregivers, so that they can sort of give them direction to how to access the roadmap. And finally, the printable version of Driving with Dementia and research studies for healthcare professionals. So if they clicked on assessing fitness to drive, it talks about the inevitability of driving cessation in people with different types of neurodegenerative dementia, regardless of the type. Makes it essential to assess fitness to drive by conducting an in-office assessment at various stages of disease progression. This is important for safety of people with dementia and the public. Given the range of complex factors that can affect driving ability, it's important to gather information from different perspectives during the assessment. Equally important that you base your decision on the sum of the findings rather than just from a specific component of the assessment. In addition, after the assessment, you must follow legislative requirements. And then we go through an 8-step assessment that we recommend. If they click on learning about reporting, licensing, and transportation options, it brings them to this site. And we have really created links with each of the provinces and territories so that clinicians can get information about resources and legislation that is specific to the province which they are working in. This is the printout of the Driving Dementia Roadmap. It's a handout that could be provided to people living with dementia and family carers. It highlights on it the different areas that they can get information and resources, understanding how dementia affects driving, recognizing when it may be time to stop driving, having productive conversations, dealing with emotional impact, getting around without driving, and learning about licensing, reporting, and transportation options. Of course, it gives them the link to the website, and as the health provider, you can choose to do different things. Like you might want them to focus on a particular area and say, why don't you focus on this specific aspect of the Driving Dementia Roadmap, and we'll discuss it at our next visit. Hopefully this can be helpful to health providers in sharing the availability of the roadmap. Now, in terms of dissemination, we launched the roadmap in October 2022. There was an email blitz to clinical research, dementia-based networks and associations. We conducted numerous webinars. We conducted numerous interviews, for example, with the Globe and Mail, the CBC, the National, CBC Radio, and Global News. We submitted this to the World Health Organization for consideration, and based on a thorough review, including people with lived experience, they decided to include it in the World Health Organization Global Dementia Knowledge Exchange platform. We more recently, in January of this year, did a radio ad campaign in 5 regions in Canada, and to date, over 37,000 visits to the site have occurred from 87 different countries. We are continuing to explore the DDR's uptake and impact. Our main research questions are: how does the DDR get taken up, adopted, and utilized? And how does it impact the way users approach and manage driving cessation? This includes people living with dementia, family friend carers, and health providers. And this is ongoing work. We are also using Google Analytics to look at use of the website and the individual elements. And we're conducting surveys and interviews. And in fact, we're looking for participants, and it includes family members or friends, but also I know that there are health providers who are participated today as well. And this is information of how you can reach out to participate in this. It really involves using the DDR for 2 to 6 weeks, completing a diary to record your impressions of the DDR, and then taking part in an interview via Zoom for 30 to 60 minutes. We're also, this is for the health care providers who are interested in participating. At the bottom here is a research associate who you can reach out to if you have an interest to do that. And I'm going to stop here. So hopefully I've left sufficient time for questions and to engage in any discussion that would be of interest.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to stop the recording now.